When you hear the name Grace Kelly, 1,000 images rush to mind. The golden smile, the sparkling eyes, the way she seemed to move as though the world itself was a ballroom, built just for her. To the world, she was the perfect woman, elegant, poised, and untouchable. But behind the flawless photographs and the glittering fame was a woman of deep emotion, quiet rebellion, and a longing that no crown could ever truly satisfy. This is the story of the girl who had everything and chose to leave it all behind. Grace Patricia Kelly was born on November 12, 1929, in Philadelphia, into a world of privilege and expectation. Her father, John Brendan Kelly, was a self-made millionaire, a man of grit and glory, who had won 3 Olympic gold medals for rowing and built a thriving construction empire. Her mother, Margaret Major Kelly, was a former model, known for her elegance and discipline, who later became the first female athletic coach at the University of Pennsylvania. They were the epitome of the American dream, strong, proud, and larger than life. And yet, in that household of champions, Grace was the quiet one. While her siblings chased medals, trophies, and applause, Grace was content with books, art, and daydreams. She was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and introspective, a quality her father found difficult to understand. He often called her a bit too dreamy, not realizing that within that dreaminess lay a vision far greater than even he could imagine. Grace adored her family, but often felt like the delicate flower in a garden of oak trees. She loved beauty, poetry, and the gentle rhythm of stories, things that had little place in the rough and tumble Kelly household. By the time she reached her teenage years, Grace knew one thing for certain: she wanted to act. Acting, for her, was not about fame. It was about transformation, about becoming someone else, someone braver, freer, more expressive. When she told her parents she wanted to study drama, they were skeptical. To them, Hollywood was not a place for a Kelly. But Grace was determined. She applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and was accepted. It was there, among scripts and stage lights, that the quiet girl from Philadelphia began to blossom. New York in the late 1940s was alive with possibility. Grace lived in a small apartment at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, balancing acting classes with modeling jobs to pay her way. She would walk to auditions through the winter snow, clutching her portfolio, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. Her instructors noticed something rare: she wasn't loud or theatrical. She was subtle, instinctive, and emotionally true. Every gesture, every pause, meant something. She didn't perform, she lived. By 1950, Grace began appearing in live television dramas, those intense, one-take performances broadcast straight into living rooms across America. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her presence, that calm, luminous energy, that captivated producers and audiences alike. Soon, film offers followed. Her first appearance on the big screen was in 14 Hours, 1951, where she played a small role opposite Paul Douglas and Richard Basehart. It was brief, but unforgettable. The camera seemed to love her, every angle, every glance. Hollywood had found something special. Then came High Noon, 1952. Grace was only 22 when she starred opposite Gary Cooper, one of the biggest stars of the time, playing Amy Fowler Kane, the soft-spoken Quaker bride torn between love and duty. Grace delivered a performance of quiet strength. The film became an instant classic, and though her role was small, audiences couldn't take their eyes off her. She had something rare: the ability to make stillness powerful. But even then, Grace wasn't satisfied. She wanted more than beauty, more than typecasting. She wanted depth, challenge, and meaning. Hollywood was eager to mold her into their next glamorous icon, but Grace resisted. She wanted to be an artist. That chance came when John Ford, one of Hollywood's legendary directors, cast her in Mogambo, 1953, alongside Clark Gable and Ava Gardner. The film was shot in the wilds of Africa, and Grace, elegant as ever, faced sweltering heat, wildlife, and the daunting presence of 2 Hollywood legends. Yet, she stood her ground. Her performance was luminous, filled with emotion and quiet intensity. When the film premiered, critics hailed her as a revelation. She won a Golden Globe and received her first Oscar nomination. Overnight, Grace Kelly became Hollywood royalty. But the real transformation came when she met Alfred Hitchcock. Hitchcock, the master of suspense, was instantly captivated by Grace. She was his muse, the embodiment of his favorite archetype, the cool blonde with a mysterious fire underneath. Their first collaboration, Dial M for Murder 1954, showcased her elegance and intelligence. But it was their next film, Rear Window 1954, that immortalized her. As Lisa Fremont, Grace was everything Hollywood adored, breathtakingly beautiful, sophisticated, and fearless. Her on-screen chemistry with James Stewart was electric. There's a moment in that film when she leans in to kiss him softly, tenderly, and the entire screen seems to melt. Audiences didn't just watch her, they believed in her. She wasn't acting, she was living truth through stillness. Hitchcock adored her professionalism. Grace has style without arrogance, he once said. She's the kind of woman men dream of and women admire. But, even as her fame soared, Grace remained grounded. She read voraciously, kept her circle small, and wrote long letters home. Hollywood was dazzled by her serenity, but beneath that calm, Grace was searching for something real. Her next film, The Country Girl 1954, changed everything. Gone were the diamonds and gowns. In their place stood a raw, emotional performance as the weary wife of a failing alcoholic actor, played by Bing Crosby. The role demanded vulnerability, a kind of naked honesty that Hollywood's glamour machine rarely allowed. Grace delivered it with heartbreaking depth. When she won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1955, the audience erupted. The Ice Queen had melted before their eyes. And yet, at the height of her fame, Grace felt strangely empty. She had achieved everything an actress could dream of: fame, awards, adoration, and still, something was missing. The endless parties, the flashing cameras, the contracts, it all began to feel hollow. She was restless, lonely. She longed for love, for peace, for something real. Her romantic life, meanwhile, was complicated. Grace had been linked with several of her co-stars, Clark Gable, William Holden, and Ray Milland, among others. Some of these relationships were brief, others entangled and painful. Grace was drawn to older, complex men who often turned out to be unavailable. In her heart, she yearned for stability, a love that would not crumble under the weight of fame. Then came 1955, the year that would change everything. Grace was in Cannes, representing the United States at the Cannes Film Festival, a glittering event of beauty and excess. While there, she received an invitation for a photo shoot. Not an ordinary one, but one inside the Prince's Palace of Monaco. The idea was simple: a publicity shoot featuring Hollywood's reigning queen with European royalty. Grace, ever gracious, accepted. What she didn't know was that destiny had already set the stage. The next day, Grace Kelly walked through the ornate halls of the Prince's Palace, dressed in a floral gown, her golden hair swept elegantly back. Cameras flashed as she smiled politely, unaware that every step she took was leading her toward a love story that would change her life forever. And there, waiting in that sunlit hall, stood Prince Rainier III of Monaco. He was handsome, charming, and very much a prince, but not in the fairy tale sense. Rainier was serious, thoughtful, and deeply aware of his responsibilities. Monaco was small, fragile, and in need of renewal. He saw in Grace not just beauty, but grace itself. Poise, dignity, and warmth. Their meeting was brief, but unforgettable. Grace returned to America, continuing her work, but something had shifted. She began writing letters to Rainier. He wrote back. The exchanges were private, tender, filled with curiosity and affection. Over time, those letters turned into love. The world didn't know it yet, but Hollywood's brightest star was about to make a choice that would shock them all. A choice between a kingdom of cameras and a kingdom by the sea. When Grace Kelly returned to America from Cannes in 1955, something in her had changed. The bright lights of Hollywood still dazzled, but her heart was no longer there. Somewhere, far away across the sea, a prince had left a quiet mark on her soul. She had met many men before, actors, directors, producers, men of power and charisma. But Prince Rainier of Monaco was different. He didn't see her as a movie star, he saw her as a woman. Their correspondence deepened in the months that followed. Letters flowed between Monaco and Philadelphia, filled with tenderness and longing. They wrote about art, family, duty, and dreams. Grace found in him a man who valued privacy and tradition, qualities that resonated with her own quiet heart. Rainier, meanwhile, was enchanted by her grace, intelligence, and warmth. In December 1955, Rainier visited the United States. Officially, it was a goodwill tour. Unofficially, it was to see Grace. When he arrived in Philadelphia, he was welcomed by the Kelly family with open arms, though not without a touch of Irish skepticism. John Kelly, Grace's father, was proud but cautious. He saw a man courting his daughter not with movie contracts, but with the promise of a crown. "My daughter's not a dowry," he reportedly told a journalist. But deep down, he couldn't resist the prince's charm. Rainier spent Christmas with the Kellys. Between family dinners, quiet walks, and long conversations, Grace and Rainier grew closer. They shared laughter, stories, and the rare silence that only true comfort brings. By the time the new year dawned, the prince knew he wanted to marry her. The world woke up in January 1956 to the headlines that made history. Grace Kelly to marry Prince Rainier of Monaco. The news exploded. Like a fairy tale come to life, the most beautiful actress in Hollywood was going to be a real-life princess. The public was mesmerized. It was Cinderella but real. Yet, beneath the headlines and fanfare, the decision wasn't as simple as it seemed. Grace loved Rainier, yes, but the choice meant walking away from everything she had built: her career, her independence, her country. Hollywood begged her to stay. Directors like Hitchcock pleaded for one more film. Studio heads offered fortunes. But Grace's mind was made up. "I've had a wonderful life in Hollywood," she said softly, "but it's time for something new." The wedding preparations were monumental. The union wasn't just between two people, it was between worlds. Monaco, tiny principality nestled on the French Riviera, saw the marriage as a chance for revival. The country's finances were struggling, and the publicity from marrying a Hollywood star promised a new golden era. Grace arrived in Monaco aboard the SS Constitution, accompanied by her family, friends, and over 80 pieces of luggage. The ship's arrival was broadcast worldwide. Thousands lined the docks, waving flags and cheering as the soon-to-be princess waved from the deck, her smile radiant, but her eyes filled with emotion. She was leaving behind not just a career, but a life. The wedding was divided into two ceremonies: a civil service on April 18, 1956, and a grand religious ceremony on April 19, held at the Cathedral of St. Nicholas in Monaco. The world watched in awe. It was one of the most lavish weddings in history, covered by every major newspaper and broadcast lived to millions. Grace's wedding gown, designed by MGM costume designer Helen Rose, remains one of the most iconic dresses ever created. Made of silk, lace, and pearls, it took 36 seamstresses 6 weeks to complete. When Grace appeared in it, she didn't look like an actress playing a princess, she was one. As she walked down the aisle, a hush fell over the cathedral. Rainier looked at her with tears in his eyes, and for a brief moment, the entire world seemed to stop. When the ceremony ended, she was no longer Grace Kelly, she was Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco. But as the applause faded, and the world celebrated, Grace found herself standing at the threshold of a new life that was far more complicated than any film script. The palace, with its marble halls and ocean views, was breathtaking, but it wasn't Hollywood. It was a centuries-old world, bound by rules, rituals, and expectations. Every move, every word, every smile was watched and judged. Grace, the independent actress, now had to learn the delicate art of monarchy. Gone were the movie sets and late-night rehearsals. In their place came formal dinners, charity galas, and state visits. Rainier, though deeply loving, was a man of duty and tradition. He expected Grace to adapt to royal life quickly, and she did with her trademark poise and quiet strength. But deep inside, there was an ache. The transition wasn't easy. Grace's Hollywood friends missed her, and she missed them. She wrote letters to old co-stars and directors, describing her new life beautiful, yes, but often lonely. Hitchcock, in particular, missed his muse. He sent her scripts, hoping to lure her back for one final film. For a moment, Grace considered it, but palace advisors made it clear. The Princess of Monaco could not return to acting. It was beneath her royal status. When she declined Hitchcock's offer to star in Marnie 1964, he was heartbroken. Grace was too. That decision marked the final, irreversible break between Grace Kelly, the actress, and Princess Grace, the royal. But if Hollywood lost a star, Monaco gained a symbol. Grace devoted herself fully to her new role. She embraced charitable work, focusing on children's welfare, education, and the arts. She helped modernize Monaco's hospitals, supported local artisans, and became the patron of countless cultural projects. Her calm dignity and compassion won over the Monegasque people, many of whom had initially doubted the American actress. Slowly, the fairy tale became real. Grace and Rainier welcomed their first child, Princess Caroline, in 1957, followed by Prince Albert in 1958, and Princess Street Fanny in 1965. Motherhood filled the void Hollywood had left behind. Grace adored her children. She read to them, painted with them, and tried to give them a childhood untouched by fame. She once said, "Being a mother has taught me more about love than all the movies in the world." Yet, even as she found joy in her family, there were moments of quiet sadness. She missed the creative spark of acting, the thrill of storytelling. She still collected scripts, read plays, and occasionally helped stage performances for Monaco's theater groups. The artist within her never truly faded. It simply changed form. The press, however, was relentless. Every gesture, every outfit, every public appearance was dissected. The same fame that had once lifted her now became a cage. She was no longer Grace Kelly. The woman she was an icon, a symbol of elegance and perfection. The pressure was immense. And then there was the marriage. While Grace and Rainier shared genuine love and respect, their lives were far from the fairy tale the world imagined. Rainier's duties kept him occupied, and Grace's adjustment to palace life was often isolating. Cultural differences, expectations, and royal responsibilities weighed heavily. Grace, ever the perfectionist, bore it all with grace, but behind the palace walls, there were tears. In interviews, she was always composed. When asked if she missed acting, she smiled and said, "Sometimes, but I've chosen another kind of stage." That quiet remark carried layers of truth. For Grace, life in Monaco was indeed another kind of performance, one where the script was written not by directors, but by destiny. Still, she found ways to keep her creativity alive. She became deeply involved in the Princess Grace Foundation, which supported emerging artists and young performers, a way of giving back to the world she once belonged to. She organized poetry readings, art exhibitions, and cultural events, bringing light to Monaco in ways no one else could. But perhaps her most profound role was that of a unifying force. Grace brought the world's attention to Monaco, turning a tiny principality into a glamorous destination. Through her elegance and compassion, she made Monaco matter on the world stage. Wherever she went, she carried an aura of serenity that few could match. People admired her not because she was a princess, but because she embodied grace in every sense of the word. Still, in quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the palace halls were silent, Grace often looked out at the sea, that vast horizon between her two worlds. Hollywood was far behind her, but its memories still lingered. The laughter of film sets, the long rehearsals, the magic of storytelling, they whispered in the corners of her heart. Sometimes she would slip into her private room, play old records, and leaf through photo albums of her Hollywood days. There was nostalgia there, but no regret. When asked years later if she missed fame, she simply said, "No, fame is fleeting. Love endures." And yet, for all her peace, life had a way of testing even the most serene souls. Grace's later years were marked by both triumph and turbulence. Her children grew up under the blinding glare of international attention. Her husband faced political challenges, and the fairy tale kingdom she helped build began to show cracks beneath the surface. Grace handled it all with the same quiet strength that had carried her from Philadelphia to the palace gates. To the world, she was perfection. To herself, she was still Grace, a woman balancing duty and desire, love and loss, fame and simplicity. She once said to a friend, "I sometimes wonder what might have happened if I'd stayed in Hollywood. But then I look at my children, and I know this was my path." The girl who once dreamed of applause had traded the stage for a kingdom. But even princesses are human. Even fairy tales, as beautiful as they are, have shadows. And soon, those shadows would fall. The 1960s and 70s brought change everywhere, in music, politics, fashion, and culture. But within the quiet marble walls of the Prince's Palace of Monaco, time seemed to stand still. Princess Grace had now lived 2 decades as royalty. Her once bright Hollywood star transformed into a symbol of timeless dignity. Yet even amidst the splendor, she often felt the pull of 2 worlds: the world she had left behind, and the one she had built anew. Monaco, thanks to Grace's influence, had become more than just a wealthy enclave on the French Riviera. It was now a global symbol of sophistication, art, and beauty. Tourists flocked there, drawn by the allure of the glamorous princess who once graced the silver screen. Grace had brought not only fame, but also refinement and compassion to the tiny state. Under her guidance, cultural festivals flourished, hospitals were improved, and the arts found a new home. But the pressures of royal life never truly eased. Grace's role demanded constant perfection: perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect smiles. She carried that weight with the same elegance she once carried a gown on a movie set. Yet beneath the surface, she battled loneliness. Prince Rainier was often preoccupied with affairs of state, and their marriage, though respectful and full of affection, lacked the spontaneity and romance it once had. Grace found solace in creativity. She turned increasingly toward art: painting, poetry, and photography. Her sketches captured the same quiet longing that had once filled her screen performances. In one of her journals, she wrote, "Art has always been my refuge. When I draw, I am Grace again. Not a princess, not a figure, just Grace." Her children were now growing up. Princess Caroline, the eldest, had inherited her mother's strength and independence. Prince Albert, thoughtful and reserved, was being prepared to one day rule. And Princess Street Fanny, the youngest, was spirited and free-spirited, much like Grace herself had been as a young woman. Grace adored them fiercely. She tried to raise them with as much normalcy as royal life allowed, encouraging them to chase dreams, not titles. But she also worried. The media was relentless, and every decision, every teenage rebellion, was magnified by the press. By the late 1970s, Grace began stepping back from public life. She preferred her gardens, her art studio, and quiet evenings reading by the window. Yet, even as she aged, she remained breathtakingly beautiful: not the glamour of a movie star, but the serene beauty of a woman who had lived fully and gracefully. Her silver hair framed her face like a halo. Her eyes, still luminous, carried stories of joy and sorrow. Friends who visited her often said she seemed both content and wistful. She spoke fondly of her Hollywood days, not with regret, but with gratitude. "Those years gave me wings," she told one friend, "but this life taught me how to use them." Still, there were moments when her heart ached for the stage, the camera, the thrill of creation. She occasionally helped direct local plays and poetry readings in Monaco, but the world would never again see her as the actress she once was. Hitchcock once called her his lost masterpiece, and perhaps that's what she was: a work of art the world never stopped missing. Then came September 13, 1982, day that would change everything. Grace and her daughter, Princess Street Fanny, then just 17, were returning to Monaco after spending time at their country home in Rock. Grace insisted on Driving, she loved the winding roads of the French Riviera, their turns framed by cliffs and sea. The morning was clear, golden, and peaceful. She packed a few dresses in the back seat, humming softly as they began their descent toward Monaco. But somewhere along that familiar road, fate intervened. At a sharp curve near Capdale, Grace's Rover 3500 suddenly veered off the road, crashing through a stone barrier before plunging down a steep slope. The car tumbled, landing amidst trees and rock. Witnesses rushed to help. Street Fanny, though injured, managed to survive. Grace, however, was unconscious. Both were rushed to the hospital in Monaco. News spread like wildfire. Around the world, people held their breath. The idea that Grace Kelly, the eternal symbol of grace and beauty, could be hurt was unthinkable. Fans gathered outside hospitals, churches, and cinemas, lighting candles and praying. Doctors fought to save her, but Grace had suffered a massive brain hemorrhage, believed to have caused the crash. On September 14, 1982, at 10:55 p.m., Princess Grace of Monaco was pronounced dead. She was only 52 years old. The world stopped. For a generation that had grown up watching her glide across the screen and later across palace balconies, it felt as though something pure and irreplaceable had been taken away. Hollywood stars wept. Monaco mourned. Millions of people from the glitziest cities to the quietest towns felt a collective heartbreak. Prince Rainier was devastated. The strong, stoic ruler was seen breaking down in tears, something he had rarely shown in public. He lost not just a wife, but his anchor, the woman who had given his small nation a soul. Grace's funeral, held at the Cathedral of St. Nicholas in Monaco, was attended by royalty, presidents, and movie legends from across the world. Among them were Cary Grant, her dear friend and former co-star, and many of the people who had shared her life, both on and off the screen. The cathedral was draped in white lilies, Grace's favorite flower, as her coffin was carried through the same aisle she had walked down as a bride. Even the heavens seemed to mourn. Rain fell softly on the stone steps as church bells tolled over Monaco. Inside, the prince stood beside his children, pale and trembling, holding back tears as he whispered his final goodbye. Princess Caroline, just 25, held her brother's hand. Street Fanny, recovering from her injuries, was unable to attend. The world watched in silence. When the ceremony ended, and the coffin was lowered into the royal vault, Monaco lost its light. For years after, Rainier would visit her grave quietly, alone, often late at night. He never remarried. He once said, "She is still here. Everywhere I look, I see her." Grace's passing left behind not just grief, but a legacy, one that transcended film, fame, or royalty. She had shown the world that beauty wasn't about perfection, but about kindness, dignity, and humility. Her life had been a fairy tale, yes, but it was also a reminder that fairy tales are fragile, that even the most radiant lives carry sorrow beneath the sparkle. In the decades since her death, Grace Kelly's story has never faded. Her films remain timeless. Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, High Society, The Country Girl, each one capturing a different shade of her brilliance. Young actresses still study her performances, hoping to capture that same effortless magnetism. Designers still reference her style, and generations who never met her still feel as though they know her. But perhaps what endures most is not her beauty, or her fame, or even her title. It's her grace, that rare, unshakable composure that defined her from beginning to end. Whether she was a shy girl from Philadelphia, a Hollywood star, or a princess walking through marble halls, she carried herself with quiet dignity. There's a haunting quote often attributed to her: "I would like to be remembered as someone who accomplished useful deeds, who was a kind and loving person." And she was. In the years after her death, Prince Rainier established the Princess Grace Foundation, dedicated to supporting emerging artists in theater, dance, and film, the very passions that had shaped her life. Through that foundation, her spirit continues to nurture creativity, to lift young dreamers who remind the world of who she once was. When Rainier himself passed away in 2005, he was laid to rest beside her, reuniting the prince and the princess who once made the world believe in fairy tales. Today, if you walk through Monaco, you can still feel her presence. Her portrait hangs in galleries, her smile graces stamps and coins, and the palace gardens still bloom with the roses she planted. The sea, which she loved so dearly, whispers her name in the wind. Grace Kelly's story is more than the tale of an actress who became a princess. It is the story of a woman who sought meaning beyond fame, who traded applause for peace, and in doing so, found immortality. In a world that often celebrates noise and ambition, Grace reminded us of the power of stillness. She showed that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in gentleness. And even now, decades after she left this world, her light hasn't dimmed. It lingers in her films, in her foundation, in the memories of those who adored her, like the final glimmer of sunset over the Mediterranean. Because Grace Kelly didn't just play a princess. She was one, not by title, not by crown, but by spirit. And sometimes, when we watch her glide across an old film screen, in black and white or golden Technicolor, it feels, for just a moment, like she never really left us at all.